We are talking about automation for a while now, and not since last year. It's a hot topic since ages, but never we made it in the right manner, in the right way. And I like to make a remark, which I did yesterday as well. We talked about OSS. In my company, I'm coming from Deutsche Telekom, we are not talking about OSS. Because if I mention OSS in my company, then immediately the finance people will be nervous because it costs a lot of money. Of course, in the future it will cost also money, but we know we call it nicely network and service management. It's much easier to get awareness from the board if you're talking about that one. And then you're talking about automation, but automation from end-to-end point of view, including the customer layer. I think that is a huge difference if you're talking about automation in our days today. Well, concerning the zero-touch activity in ETSI, it had a little bit of history. We, means Deutsche Telekom, organized a workshop in December of 2016 where I invited a bunch of people from all areas of the industry. It was STOs, vendors, operators, universities, and we discussed it on a very intensive basis on 2 days. What are the obstacles or what to achieve automation or what should be changed in the future concerning automation of our network operations. And based on that, or the result of that was that we did a small project between kindly partners, let me say, but was a little bit unstructured in the way of regulation. It was really to find out what are really the obstacles to achieve automation for us. And finally then, the outcome was that he said, okay, well, this area is really interesting to talk. There's a need to push the idea forward. And then we went to ETSI and asked, okay, is it possible that you can host our idea, our zero-touch initiative? And finally, we got the approval in December. That was great. And the kick-off meeting was in January. Right after that, we got the approval. Right after Christmas, and the result was very, very positive. We had 14 founding members, and the kickoff was about 14 partners and members which signed the agreement with ETSI. And as I said this morning, we are increasing over time. Last week we had our second meeting, face-to-face meeting in Helsinki. Nokia hosted that. And we had, in these days, we had roughly 45 members, participants which signed. And as I said this morning, yesterday I got the approval coming close to 50 members and partners. I think we are increasing over time. And that gives me a good feeling that we're doing the right thing in the right time. And that is good. But I'd like to give you an overview of what we are doing with the project, where we are, and what are the next steps. And please feel free to ask questions. Yesterday I had 10 minutes to talk. Today I have 20 minutes. That is much better. Yesterday I missed my time yesterday, but now we have much more time to talk about that. Okay, I think a couple of points we already discussed this morning, and what is the big change in our industry in which we have to manage. It's really about the complexity, and I think that is something which we have to consider, that we are increasing over time the complexity of our networks. And finally, if you're doing that, we are also increasing complexity of management of that one. I'm also with ETSI NRV for a while now, since 2012, 2013, and my colleagues expressed me the idea about virtualization. I'm coming from operations. Most of the time I work in operations, and immediately I said to my colleagues, okay, what you're doing here, you are definitely increasing complexity, and it will be really difficult to manage that in a complex environment. And now we are looking about 5G, we're looking about slicing, and all these nice buzzwords which we are using in our industry. But finally, all of that has a huge impact on the management of our networks. And our customers looking for a good service based on a good quality, and if we are not able to find a solution for that one based on automation, it will be difficult to continue to deliver the service to the customer in a really good quality. And that should be really clear for us. If you're not solving that one, maybe this supplier will, or this vendor or operator will survive. We have the best solution for that one. That is my deep belief. If we are not doing that, then we are coming in trouble. Okay, if we're doing it also right, that's my last point here on this slide, that we will create also some business models, and we will have a better opportunity to deliver service to the customer and give the customer the freedom to create their service by click on the portal. You can say, I like this service for you and that service from you. No, I cancel that one. It's much more easier if the customer can do that. It's much more of a process to manage the service in front of the customer. And that is something what should be as an outcome of our automation discussion as well. Okay, well, we are talking about full end-to-end automation. That's, we had our meeting in January, as I mentioned. We are people coming from NT and IT, from all parts of the industry. That is good, but if you're talking about automation, with different people, with different backgrounds, it's really difficult to understand in the first place, what does it mean, automation? And you have to find a clear definition of what it means. From our point of view, it means automation about all domains, including the service level to the customer. And that is in the scope of our activity to enable automation end-to-end. Yeah, well, that's what other obstacles that we have. I think that's more or less well known. We have a lot of inconsistencies, management frameworks. If we are talking, no, I mentioned OSS. If you're talking about OSS, each of the domains, each of the vendors have their own network element system and have their own idea how to manage. And that makes it really difficult for them, from an operator point of view, to operate the management in a very efficient way. It costs a lot of money to do some adaptation on the interfaces between network element systems and the network elements themselves, and on top on the OSS level. And that is something what we have to eliminate if you talk about automation. We have so many silos. Each domain has their own silo, each domain has their own management system. And we as operators spending millions on an annual basis to do some adaptation on this OSS thing. Well, you see the lack of interoperability. That is also well known. We talk about that since a couple of years now. I'm long enough in the business. We did it 30 years ago, as we talked about defining of GSM. Nobody cares about that one. It was early days. But since that, we're talking, if we introduce a new technology, always about how we can optimize, how we can do it better. But it was a given. OSS was there. Nobody did anything about that one. And I think now is really time to change that. As I said in the beginning, if you're not able to do that, then we come in really into trouble. Okay, there's a little background, something I mentioned before. We had 14 founding members as we asked for the approval by ETSI. You can find the white paper on the ETSI page, white paper from operator point of view. It's clearly indication what we are targeting to, what is in our interest from operators, what we're looking for. And that is something what we, of course, you can imagine we had a couple of discussions or questions why you need an own ISG for that. You have an ISG about ENI, and Louis mentioned this morning, we have a close cooperation between the different ISGs also with NFV ISG. It is important that we are not talking in separate, we have an interaction between the different ISGs. That is internally in ETSI, but if you're looking outside, of course, we're coming to this point a little bit later. There is a need to discuss this topic across the industry. That means to target with open source projects like OSM or ONUP, to target also with other SDOs. Maybe they have also some good solution for our topics, for our objectives we like to solve. It should be really an industry-wide approach and not a single approach by one organization. I think that is really key to understand that we are not in competition to each other. And that's essentially what I like to emphasize here, because, as I said, we got a couple of questions, why by the hell you are doing that? And, well, that is clear. And the question is valid. And you will also find the FQA session, the ETSI paper, the site where we give some answer about this obviously question. Of course, we saw this morning or yesterday what MEF presented. This was also an interesting topic. I think there is a need to discuss it more in detail, what the MEF is doing, how we can use it, how we can bring it in our ideas. Okay, there's a bunch of companies. Now you missed one logo. It is from yesterday, from Cox. It needs to be updated, but what it changed was the 50 companies thing that went on top. That was not there yesterday. But I think within a couple of months or weeks, I hope that we will pass this 50 companies boundary. You see that we have a couple of companies coming from different part of the industry, and that is really good. We have a common approach, a common understanding, and we are working jointly on the activity. What we discussed and what we agreed on our kickoff meeting was which work items should be in the scope of the activities, because we try to avoid to boil the ocean. The topic is huge, the topic is important, but if you try to boil the ocean, you know what happens then, you will achieve nothing. And this first 5 work items, that is what we discussed and agreed in January. We're talking about use cases and requirements. Then a reference architecture is in the scope of the idea. Then end-to-end management on orchestration based on slicing. Because slicing is a hot topic. Nobody talks about how we can manage a slice. And that is a really interesting question. That is one of my questions which I raised to my colleagues, my engineering colleagues, and said, okay, well, guys, complexity is again a topic which we have to solve. And it's not easy to manage a slice. A similar question, I'm also in the NGMN in charge of a project, and in this project we have also the scope to discussing more 5G operations, and slicing is one topic. Then we are talking about the landscape. It will be a report. And what does it mean? Means for automation in the scope. And the 6th one is a complete new one. We agreed that last week that we like to do a proof of concept, a technical implementation. And I will show later what does it mean. And because we think POCs or learn from implementation is good. And that is what we try to do, or what we'll do in this ISG as well. Okay, the POC thing. We have to demonstrate maybe visibly on Mac what they did. We have a multi-party projects. We are looking for partners which are driving the POC. Lessons learned is one key thing. If you are looking forward concerns the learning phase, I think to create requirements, as we did it in the standardization normally, and then have some implementation to learn from that. That was maybe in the old days, it was a long time. It takes a long time before we did any implementation from learn from that part. But now we have to do it much faster and sooner. That means we have a cycle, maybe 3 months, maybe shorter, maybe longer, it depends on the topic, where we deliver requirements, specs, then we like to implement that. Also on the topic, it depends how long the POC will run. Then we have a feedback loop and learn from that one. You can say, okay, well, what is normal on that one? What is the difference on that one? The difference is definitely in the standardization approach. Normally it takes longer to learn from that one. I think maybe a difference between open source and standard is, my view, only my view, but at the end of the day, it takes the same time. You are delivering a standard, then you delivering a standard maybe in a year. You do an open source project, you are announcing releases. That doesn't mean that every release is useful. By the end of this 12 months, then you have maybe a release which can be useful. That means we have more or less the same time. What I like to point out here is we have to learn from each other. I think the good thing is that we have a lot of experience in standardization in ETSI, definitely, and we have got some good experience based on open source project. And both of them, we have benefit from both of them, and that is the message behind here. Okay, some working principles which we agreed. Of course, you can imagine that we have some working principles internal in ETSI, but we gave us also some own one. And we like to create a spirit in this ISG, a word of openness and open discussion. And we are touching a lot of couple of points in the industry. And as I said, we have IT and NT companies in the ISG, and that makes it sometimes a bit difficult to understand what we are talking about and what we are doing. What are the next? Well, we are looking about the gaps based on the requirements. Then we try to find out how we can address the gaps to the existing bodies, as I pointed out. It's not in the scope to deliver each standards for each problem in ETSI or in the ISG. We're looking for partnership with other bodies which did some good stuff about the topic, which we like to solve. Okay, that is more or less harmonized cooperation across the industry. It gives you a picture about that one. How we see the world. We have to collaborate, the industry requirements. We are on the way to come to an agreement with GSMA. GSMA has a working group NEST, which takes the requirements from the verticals. They are looking also on our requirements, not about the management of that one, and that could a good enhancement if you cooperate with both. Okay, we are on a journey. I'd like to invite you to come on that journey. It's the Mount Everest. It's not an easy task what we have in front of us, but I think it's possible to solve that. And maybe this first base camp is here, but is here that we are on the ZTA Congress. We started that maybe in ETSI last year, and now we are moving forward in the right direction. But as I said, you are invited to join us to push the topic forward with us, because if we have more brilliant heads in the ISG and brains in the ISG, I think then it's much easier to climb up on this big mountain. I call it Zero Touch Mountain, not Mount Everest. But in principle, it's the same thing what we have to like to do. Okay, link to here. I have 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I'm just. Well, that's only. That is more or less the last one. Yeah, and if you have some further questions, send me an email or to the ETSI support team. I promise that we will get very soon a reply on this question. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Klaus? Well, let me ask one. In manufacturing, we have design for automation. Should we be really thinking about designing services on functions for automation of the operations thereafter? Should it come into the process of network and service design much earlier?
Absolutely. What I did not mention here is we are focusing on the technology side of automation, but it has definitely an impact to each of the companies. The network should be also designed for automation. That means the split between engineering, planning, and operations, that is obsolete. We have to find a way how we can cooperate also in the companies between the different departments in order to make it better than we have today.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Klaus.